Hey guys, this is Nick. We're back with another episode in the studio, and today we're going to go over how to write to picture. I have a cue up here from the show Unikitty, which I write music for. It's an action cue that it has a lot of different things going on within a couple minutes, and I thought this would be a good one to show how I write to actual video. Well, I won't be able to show the picture, but I'll talk about how I change time signatures, tempos, key, show the markers that I write when I'm writing, and just the overall how I start working on a given cue on any day. So without further ado, I'm going to load this puppy up, and you can see here that at the top here I've written I always start out by writing some cue markers. So on here you can see I just wrote the length of this cue, which goes from here to here. So I'll look at the picture and I'll kind of just highlight where it is, and I'll put a full thing there, and then I'll watch back the picture multiple times to say, okay, here's what's happening. So here in this moment I wanted to hit, this portal opens, something happens here, this evil rabbit, he said this is a thing, and then a pink I think tells me that that's something I need to revise. So I keep moving here, just have these different markers here that help me within the scene. And I know things are going to switch around as I change time signatures and as I write the scene, but it's helpful to lay this down before you start. And I also above that have a progression markers track, which tells me the progression of the music I'm writing, which is good. Like in a time like today where I'm reopening a track and I haven't worked on this in months, so I don't really remember what it is. It's helpful to say, oh, this is in C minor, goes to E minor, G sharp minor, and then back to C minor. So that's helpful. But anyway, here we go. Let's listen to the beginning of it, and then I'll stop. Okay, so that first section kind of walks you through what's happening in this scene. Starts with a big hit, a lot of crazy stuff happens, and then we just have this big, evil, sort of epic, this portal opens and all these bad characters get sucked into it, or sucked out of it, I think. So it kind of shows here, we have the strings playing this huge string section. So what I did is I started by writing this string section just to get a feel for the chords. I didn't want, I add all this sound design stuff later, but this helped me figure out what the chords were for this particular section. So as you can hear, it's just, we're playing, evil, and then we're out. So this was just kind of this evil sounding section, and I just wrote the strings first, and then I continued to add, the brass below it, which plays root notes similar to the strings, and just kind of helps fill out the register within the orchestra. So we have the brass playing in conjunction with the strings here. And you can kind of hear the counter line with the French horn that goes da da up from the G sharp, or up from the D sharp. And that's kind of playing opposite of what the strings are actually playing. And I just thought that kind of gave it this evil chord progression sound. Below we have choir. And the choir is more to add mood below. You can't really hear it, as you can hear, it's just down there below to add a little something. And then finally we have some synths down here, just kind of chugging along. Not too much, you can barely hear it. Yeah, so we have those things going. And then we have a couple drum hits up here that just add low end to the whole thing. in combination with the percussion down here. So that kind of just helped fill out this section here. And I'd say, and then a little rise up at the end. So when you're writing to picture, you just want to make sure you don't worry too much about the picture at first and just start writing music that feels right for the scene, and then you can morph it into what you need for that particular scene after. And just kind of start writing to picture with a full pad and then start breaking it out into individual instruments, because it's just easier to not get lost in the weeds after that. That's what I did for this section. And then moving forward, I'll play this next section, which is kind of this other fight part. We'll just play a big section of this. So that section is, at the beginning we had these short staccato strings going here, which was kind of this fight thing that they, was kind of based off the music they had in there that just helps when all these people are fighting. It just kind of played underneath the scene, just kind of generic, not generic, but short strings just kind of moving everything along. As these people are fighting, and then we kind of move forward into this section where I think he captured the good guys, and then they kept moving forward into this new scene. This was kind of like some sound design we had going on down here. Where is that? Yeah, I think it's up here. Yeah. So we had just these big drum hits that kind of helped take us into a different scene. And I add this stuff a lot to the music, just I think with the samples, it's helpful to have them, and then, obviously you need the samples, but it's helpful to have something below the samples to really help fill out when you don't have live players, because it's just not the same oomph that you'd get from someone who's actually playing. So I often will do the orchestra first and then start sound designing after. So let's play this next section up here. Sorry, I'm unmuted. Let's go. Building, building, building. And we're out. So as you can see up top here, I have a lot of very small tempo changes, which helps you with the scene if you have just trying to hit the cut and you need to hit certain parts of the scene. And I think it's super helpful to just kind of do it first and then make those final changes after, because then you can really just get in there and make sure everything's perfectly timed to picture. Because picture and animation stays very similar, whereas if you're doing live action stuff, it will constantly change. So you don't want to, you're going to be doing cuts constantly when you're doing live action. With animation, it stays pretty much the same, so that's helpful for the tempo. So for this last section here, we had this this kind of action-y thing where these strings are just kind of like playing a repeating line over this just to help over these like massive drums. And the drums are just driving us forward, like in combination with the strings. So you can just, with that kind of like percussive thing. And that's all in here, and these taiko drums and everything else, and the audio file we had in there. And as we move out of that section, we go into this part where this character hits this thing and falls down and it gets saved. So we had all these different like emotions in one section. So as you can kind of hear, okay, he's about to fall. We add this kind of, we're building up. Okay, he's falling. And then as we see here, we had a couple time signature changes to make sure we hit these sections within the music, because we needed to hit him hitting the wall, falling down into the thing, and then I think getting sucked into something else. So we needed to hit all these moments, and we couldn't do that in one tempo. So I changed from 4/4 to 2/4 back to 4/4 just to hit those moments in here. And I have these markers in here, which you can see, which helped me when I was writing. And this didn't all come together at once. There was a lot of trial and error. So after he hits that, we kind of go into this next section where the villain's kind of talking, and big string orchestra going here. And as you can see here, there's a lot going on in the strings. The violins are kind of taking everything, kind of taking the melody, and I'm doing this counterline with the violas down here, which I'll oftentimes do. I'll start by writing the melodies with the violins 1 and 2, and then adding these extra sections after that. And then we're doing brass as well, which is just kind of layering, Yeah, it's kind of playing the same line. And then kind of goes up into this final section here. We have the heroic kind of rise here, which I'll solo really quick so you can hear it. And you'll hear this kind of heroic moment. Key change, and then into this next section. As the villains get sucked into this giant portal, and what I did here was slow this tempo down to give it a little more of a realistic orchestra feel of what's called a retard, which kind of slows down the tempo at the end into slowing down everything. So that's kind of the whole cue in a nutshell. It's a lot of different sections, and the main thing I did when writing, this took a fair amount of time, but you just build it out piece by piece. You do section by section. The way I write is I don't do all strings for the whole thing. I'll do just one part here up front. I'll write everything for this part. I'll make sure, oh, it's sounding pretty good. And then I'll go forward, and then I'll keep building it out. I won't do every strings for everything and then build it that way. I like to write in sections because that's just day to day when you come in and add to it. It's helpful. I've mentioned this before, but I always do percussion if I can last, because I think it can change the layout of your track and the makeup of your track. So really try to wait till the end to do that if possible. And I have these audio files of drums that I have that I think just add a lot of meat to the bottom end of it, which a lot of drum samples can't do, so these audio ones really help. And kind of looking at this whole cue, I am using a lot of character themes in here, which if you've seen the show, you probably heard them before, but it's running through a lot of different action sequences, high tempo. This tempo is 70 or 140 BPM, just a pretty high tempo to keep the whole thing moving. I mean, it changes throughout, but roughly everything stays about the same tempo. But if you're writing to picture, I'd say get your markers and your everything down first, and then start working on piece by piece layering the cue to layering the cue with different sections. So start with your strings, then do your brass, and interlock it with the percussion next, and then do synths last, or sound design last. Because that way you don't get caught up in like making sure it's not sounding good, but if you get the chords first, it should help with the writing. So that pretty much covers it for this episode. I think we'll be covering more in future ones about how to write with just synths or writing to different kinds of scenes and things like that. If you have any other ones you want to hear about or questions or things that you'd like to see, hit me up and I can try to cover it, and we'll catch you in the next one.